to my next video on watercolor. In the last couple of videos we looked at washes. So we looked at a flat wash, a graded wash, and then the mingled wash. And then what we did was we put those all together and we created a very basic painting, this little painting here. Now the reason why I started with washes, if you haven't had a chance to look at those videos, please go and check them out if you have time, because they're going to help set you up for the rest of your painting career with watercolor. It doesn't matter whether you're going to be an abstract painter, a realistic painter, or whatever, you are always going to be using some type of wash within your body of work. So that's why I started with those. Today, the reason why I started with showing you this is because basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at another key thing about watercolor, and then we're going to be painting on this surface here. So it's a very simple, basic instructional video, and we are then going to do a little painting, not this one. I'll get that out of the way. So what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at how our pigment and our water react on our surface. So I'm using just the back of an old painting, and this is something that you guys can do. Get a back of an old painting, or even just get your paper that you're going to be using on, and we're going to just look at what watercolor paint does on this surface. And the thing that you need to understand, and this is what this is what your takeaway from today's lesson is that the pigment will only go where there is water. There is an exception to that rule, and I'll show you it later, but wherever there is water on your surface, so if I put a bunch of water over here and nothing over here, and I put paint down, it will not flow over to here. If I continue that paint down in a little squiggly manner like that, I hope you can see that it's a bit difficult, but this is where my water is. You can see that I've put the water down and it's flowing off the edge there. When I pick up my pigment and I charge that into my water on my surface, I'm going to go into this thing and I'm going to go off into the area where I don't have any water, just so you can see what happens. But if I put, this is just in the water, and I go off into the section that doesn't have water, but you can see where there is water, my pigment is flowing down. Can you see how it's flowing down that water without me doing anything else? I can continue adding pigment into this and it will continue to flow down where the water is and nowhere else. And as you can see over here, where I don't have any water, the pigment's not flowing down. And this is something that you need to, is a key thing to watercolor. It's something that you need to understand. Wherever there is water and you put pigment near it, it's going to flow into that section. So if your paper is slightly damp, it will flow into a slightly damp area as well. Not as rapidly as this has down through here, but it will still flow into it. As I said, there was an exception to the rule, and the exception is the angle of your paper. Now my paper may look totally flat to you. It isn't. It's actually at an angle. It's about a 45-degree angle. If I grab this, I'm going to actually just, put some, I don't want it to flow onto my paper. If I grab this paper and I tilt it, gravity starts to play, and see how it suddenly drips into areas where I didn't have water. And it's because there's gravity there. So this is something that you can use as well. If you want pigment to move, you can tilt your board so that it will actually move down, especially if see how I had that pool there? It flowed quite easily down. But if you don't want that to happen, don't tilt your board as much. That's pretty much it. Okay, so using that knowledge, what we're going to do now is we're going to actually create a tiny little painting of some flowers. Now I've got a picture, this is my picture. It's all zoomed in, but that's my picture of my poppies. But I actually just want a picture of all the poppies. I don't want that whole entire field. And I'm just going to do a painting that's based on a couple of poppies. And the first thing I do is I will set out and I will sort of start trying to design my composition. So design what I'm going to be putting onto my surface. And I start off with a contour drawing. So let's go and have a look at what I mean by a contour drawing. So this is the start of my contour drawing. So as you can see, I started off here. I will draw the outline. I can see I've drawn my outline of my format, so this is my format here, and I've started drawing in just the shapes, the outside shapes, and the contour is basically the contour of the actual different shapes within my composition. I then progressed and I did this one over here, and I'm exploring how these interact with that outside format. Once I did that, I then started looking at individual flowers and just did the contour lines. So as you can see, they're just contour lines. They're lines of drawing. I might just zoom in so you can see just a little bit closer. So can you see that? See how I've just got the outside lines of all of those little poppies? Again, I've done that here, and I started off with here. And I continued doing that. I continue just exploring. And the reason why I'm exploring these things is because I'm getting to know my subject more and more. The more and more I do this, the more I understand my subject. And I continued over the page, as you can kind of see through here. So let's go and have a look just a bit on contour drawings, and then we'll get into the painting. So I'll set this way. So as I said, what I do is I initially draw the outline, the outside format of my drawing. I then look at my my reference material, and I look at the different shapes that I've got, and I'm very aware of how I'm going to break up my space. If I put anything in the center of my composition, it's just going to be very static. So what most artists do is they put them into these four corners through here, and usually it's broken up into thirds, so you actually break this up into thirds. I just did it into it is in thirds, and that's what they're called by the golden rule. So you get these little places where you draw it. So if I suddenly went, okay, I'm going to put in a poppy through here, and you know, as I said, I'm just drawing those contour. I'm just drawing the contour lines. I'm not trying to be precise. I'm just, by not being precise, I am freeing myself up to just feel the gesture of the actual subject. I'm looking just to see, you know, what will happen if I put in one through here, and then another one over here. I've got a nice little side view of my poppy. And can you see how by just doing that, I'm exploring the outside of that shape. If I was to do it precisely and sit there and go, okay, I'm going to do a precise drawing of the poppy, I'm going to get very, very tight and very constricted very, very early on in my drawing, or in my actual painting process, and that's going to flow on into my painting. Well, I find that for me it flows onto my painting. So I don't want to do that. I want to just have fun with it, sort of like feel like I'm a little ant running around the edges of that flower and seeing, you know, all goes in there, and there's a little bit of a stamen, and then it comes back out, and then there's another shape through here of another petal, and then we'll back into those stamens and see what they do, and then come back around another petal, and then I've got another petal through here, and suddenly I have a shape that looks like a poppy. And then, okay, if I can pick up my pencil if I want to, and I can come back down and just, this is this stem. And I am exploring the shape of my subject. This is what your contour drawing is all about, that exploration, and it's so much fun. You know, and then I can come up here, and I'm going to be drawing one of the little bulbs things that they have there, and I can see there's a little lip there, and then I'm coming back around, then I'm coming back down. Can you see what this is doing? And so I'm understanding more and more about the poppy, about my subject. And so then when I go to paint it, I know it instinctively. I have a lot more knowledge, and I haven't spent hours laboriously drawing a poppy and then transferring that onto my paper. I'm just trying to find fun little shapes in the whole entire thing. So I encourage you, that's what I'm encouraging you to do. Draw, you know, your contour drawing, and I will then transfer this contour drawing, I'm going to draw it onto my paper in a nice fluid way, and so that when I come and put my paint over the top of it, I'm not going to be precious about those outlines, okay? So that is contour drawing. Okay, so I've done all that exploration. I've got all my, I've been playing around with that. I've been looking at the different types of poppies, and now I'm coming onto my surface, and I'm going to start putting in those contour drawings and work out my composition and work out how it's all going to look. And so I'm going to start off, and I'm thinking, you know, I think based on the design of what I wanted. I'm going to actually be painting a little poppy through here, and as you can see, I don't know if that's, well, it's not very dark, but I'll zoom in just so you can have a look. You can't see that because I'm off the side. This here is where I've started, and I will draw it darker just because for this purpose of this video. I would never draw it that dark on my surface normally, because I want my lead paint pictures pigment not to, my lead pencil not to be seen at the end of my painting, but just so you can see what I'm doing. And then I've you know, as I said, I've explored and I've discovered those different intricacies of the poppy shapes, and I'm just coming in and I'm going, okay, and this is where I'm going to have that dark shape through there, and then I've got another one over here, and there's another little edge, and just, you know, just saying, okay, that's going over there, and this is the start of my drawing. Okay, I know that this is where I want this, and I'm going to have some of those lovely little I guess buds, and it's going to come through here, and it's coming down. I'm going to have another one through here. And because I'm not looking at my photo anymore. I know what these things look like. I've been looking at them for like a couple of, like, you know, about half an hour, and I know that there's the shape of these things now, and I can just draw them instinctively. And that's the glory and beauty of doing contour drawings, because you suddenly are becoming aware of your subject and knowing what to do and what not to do. And so now I'm going to come up in, and there's another one over here. I'm going to go draw another poppy over here. And it's got this lovely shape this time. This is what it looks like, and it's got another beautiful thing through here, and oh, look at that. And I'm going to draw it's coming through here. And I'm going to have another couple, because I'm coming up this flow. I'm feeling like I've got so many of the poppies looking very similar. I've got one there, I've got one there, I've got one there. Like, see that petal and that petal is all very the same. So now I want to do something different. I want to actually have a different type of poppy shape, something that is maybe in my composition, maybe further away from all the flowers that I've got. And I'm going to be looking for something that's just a little bit more unique, something that I can put in, like, you know, it might be like the back of a flower or this, and see, I found one. There is one there. Look at that. It's the side view, and this flower's coming up over the top of it, but it's behind it. And so this is what this looks like, and it's got a little bit through there. And see how by just doing that, I've created some amazing things. So I've got this coming up through here, and I'm going to have another one of those little buds. And I'm feeling that the way this composition is working, I've got this beautiful movement through here. I'm quite happy with that. I might put another little poppy over here, just to have something that's sitting in the background, like there's one just peeking out behind this one. I can see that, yeah, there's just having just a little one that's just sort of popping out through there, just says, hey, there's something else behind here. Another one. And that is my contour drawing, and that's how I start all of my drawings with my watercolor. Actually, I do it with all my other drawings as well, especially when I'm trying to explore a subject. I'm not going to get myself bogged down with detailed drawings on my surface. Now I'm going to leave my pencil very clear, and we're going to start getting in and doing some watercolor over the top of it. Okay, so I've done my contour drawing and I'm really excited. It's looking great. I'm happy with the way the composition's looking. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up over the top of that and I'm going to put on my paint. Now I said normally what I would do is I would actually then come in, if some lines that are a bit too dark, I will actually erase them off. But before I do that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the pencils that I use on my watercolor paper. I use a 2B, I use a 2B in this case. I sometimes use a HB, but I generally will use a 2B or a 4B. I won't use anything above a 4B because what happens is if I use anything above a 4B, it will actually smudge on my watercolor paper and I won't be able to get that off. I don't use anything less than a HB, like in my, the H's, like, a 2H and all that sort of thing. The reason why I don't use those is because they can actually damage and scratch my surface, so my watercolor paper. So that's the reason why I use these two, 2B or a 4B. When I go to erase things off my paper, again I don't use a conventional eraser. I will use what is called a kneadable eraser. Now, the reason why I use a kneadable eraser is because it's softer. It's not going to damage the surface of my paper. I'm always thinking of the damaging my surface of my paper, because if I gouge into my watercolor paper, the pigment will flow into the gouge and it will leave a line, and I don't want that. Sometimes I might want that, and that's something you can think of as a design thing. So when I'm using my kneadable eraser, I'm just going to caress it over the surface to get rid of some of those darker lines. I don't try and erase everything I've done, because I won't do it particularly for this thing, because I still want to have that for this particular. I want the lines there so that I can remember what I'm doing. But these lines are actually quite a lot darker than what I would normally do, but I want them so that you can see on the video. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start painting. So remember when we were talking about the purpose of this video is that we're looking at what water and pigment do. And remember when I said that if I'm going to pick up some pigment, I'm going to try and, oh, that's a bit of a bright colour. Sorry. Just trying to create a dark, it's a little bit too dark, that's okay. Then I'm going to be painting the middle sections of my flower. So I'm going to start with this little flower down here, and I'm going to put that in. Now remember when I said that where there is no water, the pigment just sits there. As you can see, I've just created that, and now I can come in and I can just create, add some darker pigment into it if I want to. And I'm doing that mingled wash. See that mingling? I'm mingling the colours together. And now I can come back over and wash my brush off. And pick up some beautiful orange pigment for the petals. Now I can, if I touch into that, like as you can see here, it's going to bleed. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you can understand how this works, it is going to help you know what you can and cannot do with watercolor paper. Watercolors. So I know that if I want that to bleed into there. If I just touch into it, it'll bleed into that. If I don't want it to bleed into it, I won't. I can now sort of peter things off. I can soften it in areas where I want to. I can come in and I can add texture by pulling pigment off. This is the kind of things that you can do by understanding what your watercolor is not going to go anywhere other than where you've got water, and where you've got water and when you don't have water. Come in and paint. Another petal here. Final little petal through here. I'll pick up that pigment on that one just to create that thing. Now I can add, if I wanted to soften an edge, I can come in and add some water to soften edges. I can soften it through here. I can continue to pull some of that pigment off if I'm finding that it's a bit too harsh, or I can come back in and drop more pigment over the top of it, and it will bleed and run where there's pigment. and when there's where the water is, where the paper is damp. When the paper starts to dry, when the pigment starts to dry, you're less likely to get that. You also can get the cauliflowers occurring if you don't know the how wet or dry things are. But at the moment I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to, don't like that white edge through there. I do like that. I want a little bit more darkness in there for the stamens. I want to bleed these petals just slightly out into the surrounding area, because I'm going to have green there, but I don't want it to be a static painting, and so therefore I'm going to bleed those just in certain areas. If I bleed right here where there's a lot of pigment, it's going to bleed a lot of paint into that. Now I might want that, I might want it through there, or I might go, no, that's going to be a bit too much pigment. I'll show you what happens if I do. Let's just grab some water. If I lighten this area, see, I like that. I like how that one bleeds. I'm just not 100% sure I want this section here to bleed into it. And this is where watercolor differs from oils. You can bleed. You want to soften edges. You want to have the watercolor sort of paint itself in a way. Okay, I'm going to now move on and do another flower up here. I'm really happy with the way that one there looks. It actually is looking like a lovely little poppy. I tend to use two brushes, as you can kind of see. I'm I'm a nervous painter. I have to say I'm a bit of a nervous painter sometimes, and I want to keep some of the pigment on one brush, and I'll do that, and then I'll have two brushes in my hand, and it can be quite entertaining, really. But anyway, I really want this section here just to have a little bit more, because it's a petal that's closer towards me, so I want it to be darker in tone. I really do love how that just bled so nicely into that background there. All right, so I'm going to continue, and I'm going to paint the rest of these little flowers. I'm not going to talk much. I find that talking and painting is a little bit difficult. It uses two sections of my brain, but you can kind of see what I'm doing when I'm painting, and then I'm going to come in and I'll show you even more about what happens when we're going to direct the paint based on how much pigment how much water you put down and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to speed up the video and continue painting the rest of these little flowers. Darker colour to come down here. I want to show you what happens. So see how that's pooling there? If I come along and just touch it, it's going to bleed dark colour into this section. Again, it's not going to flow very far if I don't have a lot of water there. But you know, this is what I'm saying, like you're learning what your paints will do based on what you think. I can pick up pigment, so again, I should have a clean water. I'm really sorry, I've just got one thing, but I can pick up pigment and I can use the thirsty brush. Remember that thirsty brush from the other video? I can pick up pigment. See how I can move it around in this sort of wet stage and go, okay, no, I want a bit more. I want to pick up a bit in there. I know I want this section here to be just a little bit darker and warmer as it comes forward towards me. You know. And because I picked that up, it's just going to bleed, and that might be something that you want. You might want that to bleed like that. So I'm just going to leave it because I think, you know, it could be actually quite an interesting feature. But you know, if I don't like it, I can come back in with my like a tissue, and I can pull it out and soften and get rid of the thing that I don't like. That's a great thing about it. And you know, I can continue adding pigment into here if I want. But I'm just trying to create the impression of a poppy. I'm not trying to paint every single detail. I'm not that kind of painter, and I'm not going to be able to show you how to paint like that because that's not who I am. I like just, you know, exploring shapes and colour and all that. But I'm thinking all the time. I'm thinking, you know, where I want things, you know. I'm thinking, you know, does that poppy look like it's actually, this petal's coming forward and this one's going back, you know. Should I put a little bit more texture? And texture, I'm going to pick up paint and create texture that way. Or I drop more colours in, like here, do I want there to be a clear distinction between this petal here and that background petal? I can come in and I can pull it out. This is what you can do with watercolour. Bit of that edge through there. I am going to have to get some clean water. I feel like I've lost that little dark bit in the middle. Not too happy with that one, but that's okay. Perfect. Oh, that's lifted it. That's done exactly what I wanted. Sadly, my camera ran out of space on the actual disc, and I had to continue painting this little flower here because, you know, once you're in the middle of something, it's really hard for you to stop. I couldn't do that. So I did continue painting that. You can sort of see, like, I just love these sort of cauliflowers. I don't think that they're bad. I continue to use them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue painting just through and do these two little paintings, and then we're going to get on and do a little bit more, okay? Because this little flower here is just sitting behind this one, I want it to bleed, and I didn't have enough time to bleed this foreground petal into that. So I'm going to come back over the top with that. And I don't mind if that bleeds into there. I want that connection. A bit more dark in through here. I want this flower to be quite soft, and so because of that, I'm actually going to bleed it. I'm going to put a lot of water around the edges just to soften it, so it's sort of just, it's there, sort of sitting in the background. A bit more of that. And again with this flower here, I want it to be at the back, not having too much attention. It's just this thing that's soft and beautiful behind the major big poppies. Just using those soft lost and found edges. I'm going to come back over the top, obviously with lots of green, and so a lot of this colour in here is not going to shine through, but you can see that I'm softening things. I'm just pulling out a bit of that colour to create some light. Really need a little bit more. So all the poppies are done, the buds are done, the stems, not stamens, I keep on calling them stamens, but the stems are done, everything is in place, and now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be completing my painting. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this video, the purpose of this video was to teach you about the one nature of watercolor, and that is that wherever there is water on your watercolor paper, the pigment will flow into it, whether it is like very, very, very wet, or if it's slightly damp, the pigment's going to react differently on your surface. And that's what I was trying to teach you, and I'm hoping that you're getting to understand this. So this exercise here is kind of great. I'm not trying to get you to paint poppies like me. I'm not trying to get you to be a clone of me. I'm trying to get you to understand this concept that where if I'm going to put down water in certain tracks of my painting and then I'm going to drop colors in it, what the pigment's going to be doing. So that's the purpose of the video, that's the purpose of this lesson, and I hope that even just doing the poppies, you've started to understand it. But now we're going to get into a little bit more fun, and we're going to do some really cool washes. We're going to blow the pigment around and see what happens with it, okay? So let's get in there. So I'm just coming in with water. And I'm basically just trying to put initially, I don't want it to go over my stems because I want those stems to be quite light against this dark background. I'm putting in water. I should have actually mixed up my pigment first that I'm going to be putting in there. I'm just mixing up a green really. I'm going to make it a little bit a dirty green. I don't want it to be nice and pretty. In actual fact, you can mix all these colours on your surface as you go, but I just wanted to just grab a bit of this in there, and I'm just going to start infusing this into that. Grab some yellow into it. Have fun with it. Just let the watercolor paint itself. This is where watercolor shines. Just absolutely shines. I need to get it. Soften that edge. So can you see how this section of the paper here is actually dried, and so I put that pigment down but it's not flowing anywhere. So if I want to, I can come in and I can just, you know, add water and move it around, or I can just leave it. But I don't want it to coagulate in that sort of area. I'm just trying to create, it's a bit dull that colour, so I was just trying to put some warmth into it by adding some yellows. I don't mind if this bleeds into the flowers. This is just all part of my interpretation of these poppies, you know. I want that colour to sort of infuse, colours to mix together, not just be static. I do like that. And I guess the thing that I'm thinking of when I'm looking at this is, you know, is it working? Like, do I need more colour over here? You know, is my composition working? That kind of thing. Sometimes I'll go, oh no, it doesn't. I don't want that there, and so I'll put it in, and then I'll come in and I'll wipe it out just to create that difference. I don't particularly want that there, but you know, maybe if I put it down, you know, see what happens. I am traditionally an oil painter, and so I have a lot more freedom with oils, but I kind of, it has influenced the way I paint watercolour as well. I'm just going to do some final little bits, and then I'm going to call it a day, because I think that this is actually already working. I don't need to do much more to it. Just want to add just a little bit of dark into there. And that is essentially how I paint a painting, and also it sort of gives you an understanding of, you know, like I said, if where areas that are wet, the pigment will flow into it. Where areas are dry, it's not going to flow into it. So keep that in mind when you're painting. I hope you've had fun with this video, and I look forward to seeing what you guys get up to. Okay, so my watercolors poppies are done. I'm really happy with how the background has worked. I love this thing. I love how watercolor works. I love the fact that, you know, I can mingle colors into a wet surface and I get all these amazing different colors. Like through here, you know, it's wet and I've put some sort of this Hanassa yellow and a bit of the green into it, and it's mingled itself, and I didn't have to actually do that. In oils, it's so totally different. This is the nature of watercolor, and I encourage you, I just really encourage you to use the nature of watercolor. Don't try and make watercolor something that it's not. Use the nature of watercolor, and that's what this whole video is about. Just understanding one of those key one of the key personalities, or you know, characteristics of watercolor, and that is that where it's interaction with the water and the surface. So a wet surface, if you remember, a wet surface, pigment's going to flow into it, you're going to lose your brush strokes. On a dry surface, you're going to, your brush strokes are actually going to remain on the surface. If you put a brush stroke down on a dry surface like that, it's going to remain there. Whereas a wet surface, you put a brush stroke down like that, it's going to mingle and do its own thing. If you can remember that when you go to paint your watercolors, you'll know what you should be doing. There's a lot more to it, but the key takeaway from this video is that where a wet surface is going to have pigment flow through it, a dry surface it's not. In other videos, we're going to look at understanding how, you know, the dampness, the degree of dampness of your paper is also going to change how your pigment works, as well as how thick or thin your paint is. How much water is in your paint is also going to change that. But that's not for this video. We'll get into that later on. I really hope that this has helped and you've had a lot of fun with it, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video. See you later.